once again. This is Nuance, and I am Mike Scala, joined, as always, by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip-hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Having an allergy morning, but other than that, it's a regular day so far. It is only 8 a.m., so I can't really decide if it is or not. So how about yourself?
I am doing quite well. You mentioned it's 8 a.m. where you're at. This is the first time the three of us are in different time zones, all three of us, because I am in Mexico where it's Central Time, and Sheba Abraham, our co-host from the League of Women Voters, is in New York where it's Eastern Time. So 7 p.m. where you're at, 6 p.m. where I'm at. And he mentioned it's 8 o'clock in the morning over there in Japan. So thanks to the wonders of technology, we're all over the world bringing you nuance. What's going on, Sheba?
Oh, nothing so much. Everything. I've been very busy for the summer. This has been one of my busiest summers ever. But other than that, everything's going well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I have been in Mexico for the past week. I'm leaving tomorrow to get back to New York. And yeah, of course. I want to show you the view. And I would have been sitting outside, but it would be too bright and you wouldn't get to see me. So I do want to take the laptop outside for a second so you can see the view right outside my balcony here. So check this out. Let's see if we can do it. Nuance on the move.
Now, how long have you been out there in Mexico? About a week now?
For a week.
Oh.
See that?
Yes, lovely.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Right behind me is a dolphin pool.
Oh.
There's dolphins in that water.
Did you go swim with the dolphins?
I did not, because there was an extra charge, and that was one of the things that I was doing this week. So this is an all-inclusive resort. Shut this. But the game that you play here is they try to upsell you on everything, right? So it's all-inclusive, but as soon as you arrive, they try to give you the premium, whatever, right? So you're at a restaurant, they come by with a list of premium wines. You know, you're at the pool's all free, the beach is free, but then it's a premium to get to play with the dolphins, right? So I was playing this game all week where I'm like, I am not going to pay extra for anything. I paid for the all-inclusive, and I'm not going to be upsold on anything, right? So they come around with the little brochures. You know what I mean? Nope, I'm good. I actually did get to swim with the dolphins in Key West, or actually Key Largo it was. So I got that experience already. But even though I wasn't going to jump back in there, I did get to see them plenty of times. Are we still running?
You're frozen. Your voice is still going though.
Yeah.
The camera's frozen. Oh, well. Looks like we lost Mike.
Oh, we lost him?
Now he's back.
Oh, okay.
We are back. Yeah. So that's been a game I was playing. In fact, I tried to even calculate the cost of the all-inclusive, how much extra you're paying per day. Are you really saving, or is it costing you more money? And I think it's a bit of a toss-up. It really depends on how much food and how many drinks you're going to get. I do think that I probably come close to it on average. And even if it's costing a little bit extra, I think it's worth it because you just feel like you can go into any restaurant, any bar, and just get whatever you want and not worry about the price, right? It's a relaxing way to spend a week, not thinking about money.
Oh, okay.
Is that since it's all
you guys are frozen in time? I can't see or hear you.
Really?
How you just unfroze, Jay?
Yeah.
So since it's all inclusive, does that mean like you can go into any of the bars on the resort or restaurants and just eat all you can eat?
That's right.
Ooh. Yeah, you could do some damage there. You can get gain some weight off of that.
All right.
Especially if the food is good.
Yeah,
That's
definitely. They do have a gym as well. And so I did manage to get a few workouts in this week. It's actually a pretty nice gym for a hotel gym. They've got a lot of machines there. The one thing I'll say about this place is it's very Americanized, right? So this is Cancun, and it's actually my first time in Mexico. And to be honest, I still feel like I haven't been to Mexico, right? Because I did spend the week on this resort. I had family here. Usually I would go venture out and maybe take some tours, sightsee, see what's going on outside the resort. But because I had a lot of family here, we did end up just kind of staying on the property, and that was cool. But the property does go out of its way, I think, to make you feel like you're in the US, right? Like everything is in English, even the music in the gym, everywhere you go, it's all American music. The restaurants, they have like one little Mexican spot on the beach, but most of the restaurants are, Italian or Asian, or there's like an American style diner. And they really try to make you feel like you're in the US. So by some metrics, this kind of feels like Miami or just any local beach spot you would find in America, right? So if you're looking for an authentic Mexican experience, you're probably not gonna get much of that here, but it's Cancun. You should expect that in Cancun. Cancun is like the Disney World or the Las Vegas of Mexico, right? It's a very touristy area.
Right. It's been like that for decades. Like it's been a big vacation destination for people from the United States. Right. So it makes sense that they would have things that are catered for that, because I think it's probably the biggest tourist population that comes through is from the United States going to Cancun.
Right. And that's the other thing. Most people you see here, I believe, are Americans. There was a large group of Koreans actually from South Korea who came in yesterday. There might be a wedding or something that they're attending. I'm not sure. But for most of the week, it's been mostly, to be honest, white Americans here. Not a whole lot of diversity. You did see some, and I did notice that. Again, I'm going to Mexico. I want more of a Mexican experience. I want to see more culture, more diversity, more, but this particular resort, I guess, is one of the priciest ones in Cancun. And so you are seeing a ton of white Americans here. And that's just kind of the demographic that they serve at this resort,
Right. Yeah. But other than that, it seemed like, are you having a good time there? It looked like the weather was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I first got here, I think I was still in New York mode, because I was thinking, okay, what do you really do here? Is a week too long to spend here? Because there's the pool in the middle of the property. There's the beach, of course, it's right on the Caribbean Sea. And then you got the restaurants and the bars. But aside from that, there's really not much going on. They do like a little show, but not a show, but like, like they have like some people doing little theatrics, acrobatic stuff on there. But for the most part, it's just really the pool and the food and the drinking, right? So I was thinking I was going to get bored, but the week did go by pretty quickly. It helped that I had family to spend it with. So it was really just the time away with family, I do think a week is a good length of time to spend here, because I'm ready to go back already. Like I already tried restaurants at this point a couple times. How many times can you go to the pool and just sit there, and that's like the same? It's like deja vu every day, right? I think after a week, for me at least, it starts to wear thin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you can go swimming, go exercise. I guess it's probably full of people, so you probably can't get good laps in.
You cannot swim, right? No. First of all, it's very shallow water, and it's very, very crowded. But they do have a swim up bar, so I mean, it's really more of a lounging pool. You go there, you get a drink, you sit down, just chill. Again, for me at least, fun for a week, right? And now it's like, I've been to all these restaurants, I've been to the pool every day for a week. I want to get back to getting things done and feeling productive.
Yeah, got you.
And actually, for the past couple of days, I've been trying to do some work while I'm here. So
right.
I thought you were on vacation. You're working.
Yeah, I mean, work never stops though for me. I feel like I'm always on vacation and never on vacation, if that makes sense.
Right.
Because I run my own.
It's unlimited. Can you before you leave, can you just go to like these restaurants and like shove a bunch of takeout into your bag so that you can take a lot of it with you?
Well, you sit down and
looks like I'm losing him.
You order, but you can order whatever you want. You order a couple of items from one restaurant and then go to the next thing and order some more if you want.
True.
And also tips are included too. So you do sometimes tip for exceptional service, but they tell you that when you pay your all-inclusive rate, the wait staff is tipped as a part of that. And so that's nice too. They're not expecting big tips. One of our friends actually went to Cancun earlier this year to a resort that wasn't all inclusive. And he said he spent more money on tips than anything because everyone he came in contact with was expecting the tip. And that really drove up his budget. So I think probably doing the all inclusive is worth it. You know, even if it balances out, maybe you come out a little bit behind depending on how much you're going to get. It's for that peace of mind, right? You just feel like you're on vacation and not have to worry about paying people things, right? You go to a restaurant, order whatever you want. Don't think about the prices. That's always nice.
Yeah, it is.
So
sounds good. Glad you're having a good time.
I would recommend it. If I do come back to Cancun, I'm probably gonna look to do some sightseeing. I wanted to see the pyramids. You know, they've got the ruins. As I think there's an Aztec one and a Mayan one kind of close by. So I wanted to take a look at that. Didn't really get a chance to do any of that, but it was fine. You know, this was definitely a different type of vacation for me, one where I stayed on the property as opposed to venturing out. So if I come back, I would probably want to do some exploring. But this was.
But you can tour it, right? You have tour guides.
You can get tours. Yeah, right. I think also part of it was because I did the all-inclusive thing, so I wasn't trying to spend money on anything. I was like, let me really milk this and just take advantage of all the amenities that come with the all-inclusive price.
Makes absolute sense to me.
Yeah. So we'll be flying out tomorrow. I'll be back in New York.
All right. Back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Yes, yes. And I think I mentioned last week, it was a cousin of mine who got married here. So that's why I came. So that's why I had a lot of family around as well. So, yeah. And it's funny because I'm in Cancun and I'm looking at the dolphins on the pool, in the pool outside my balcony here. And while that's all happening, there was a shark attack in Rockaway. Now,
again,
yeah. So there's this picture. Let's see if I can do a share screen here, because people thought that this was a shark or potentially the shark that was the culprit. But now the word is that this is likely a dolphin. So this was off the coast of Breezy Point earlier. See if I can share screen this, because they had closed the beaches thinking that the shark was on the loose, and I guess it still is on the loose. They haven't caught it. But when this emerged, they said, oh, the shark might have been spotted off of Breezy Point. I think it created an additional panic, and the beaches were announced closed.
So they say they're thinking that the shark is actually a dolphin?
No. There was a shark attack, but there was a picture that surfaced earlier of what looked like a shark by Breezy Point, and they thought, oh, the shark is still around and need to get everyone off of the beach. But now they're saying that was the dolphin. I don't know why.
If they got sharks in the area, you definitely want to bring some dolphins around, because dolphins will kick a shark's butt.
The dolphin will kick a shark's butt?
Yeah, they do. They charge them the way that they fight them. They charge them and they ram them with their noses, and they kick sharks' butts.
I don't know why the share screen option isn't even here. They used to be here.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of shark attacks, did you see the YouTube or the video that went around about this man being attacked in Egypt? The shark ate him alive.
No, that's very depressing. Have not seen that.
There it is. So if you can see on my screen, there's a fin popping out of the water there.
Right.
Over here, they're saying that that's likely a dolphin, not the shark. But this was a very real shark attack in Auburn. I think it was Beach 59th Street. And it bit much of a woman's leg off. She was a 50-year-old woman. They took her to the hospital. She was reported to be in critical condition. They were saying she would likely survive, but obviously is going to deal with this very serious problem. I don't know what's going to happen to her leg.
So there were 2 shark attacks.
And no, one in Rockaway. Oh, Sheba mentioned somebody in Egypt, I think.
Right, was eaten alive by a shark. Okay. It's been posted all this week. People have
Right.
been talking about it. Yes,
Yeah.
and it was a tiger shark that ate the man alive.
Well, so
He
this
and
is right. So the Rockaway one, there was an expert who was consulted on this, and we don't have, I don't think, a lot of conclusive information about the type of shark yet, but from what was reported, there was a shark researcher behind the International Shark Attack file who was saying that it absolutely was a shark bite, and he suspects it was caused by either a bull shark or a juvenile great white shark. And that's being reported by Katie McFadden. So that's scary to think about, great whites
yeah.
in Rockaway.
Right. James in the chat said he heard that there were 2 shark attacks.
In Rockaway?
He hasn't specified, but he said, was there 1 shark attack or 2? I heard there were 2.
I heard about
So-
1. But what I heard today was that there was allegedly a shark sighting by Breezy Point, and that's why, because they had closed the beach. I think I heard yesterday the beaches would be closed until about 11 a.m. today, and then earlier this afternoon they were saying the beaches would be closed again. I think because they found, or they thought they found, the shark swimming by Breezy Point, but now they're saying that was likely a dolphin. But so they don't know, where it is, I guess, or how close it is at this point. But there was that shark attack yesterday. And the thing about that also, I spoke with the lifeguard, and Jay was mentioning before we came on here, we know the lifeguard personally. She's a friend of ours. She was saying that this shark attack happened only 10 feet out. So they were 10 feet from the beach where they got bit. It wasn't like they went out far into the water.
Right. Yeah,
it was really right up on the beach.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
That's very close. 10 feet is
Yeah, it is.
Very shallow water there.
Shout out to the lifeguards who go out amongst that. Like, that's, people try to get out and get away from it, but a lifeguard has to go and try to save people around that type of scenario. So someone in the chat, Jackus in the chat, said that bull sharks are more aggressive than great whites and are responsible for more bites. So let me, there was a similar story, I believe it was last summer, when we were doing the show, and we talked about it was a shark attack or shark sighting. So this is 2 years running. Like, does that mean that this is going to be a new normal for Rockaway, do you think?
Well, I think anytime you hear a story of a shark attack or even a shark sighting, it gets a lot of attention and it generates some fear and paranoia. I think that all comes from the movie Jaws many years ago, right? It's still kind of part of our culture. It's statistically not likely to happen to anyone. Of course, when it does happen, it's very scary, right? But I think we need to keep the stats in perspective. You're really not likely to get bitten by a shark. There are so many thousands of people who go into the water every day in the summer, and you hear about one shark attack and it's very scary and it's talk of the town. But again, look at the thousands of people who were not attacked, right? There was actually an article that came out earlier that said that you're more likely to be bitten by a New Yorker than a shark. So
yeah, I can see that. But I'm just thinking, like, if there must be something that's changed the sharks' behavior so that they're coming to coming to this beach around these people this close to the shore. 10 feet is incredibly close.
And I think that is a cause for concern. Obviously, I'm not an expert. I'm not a marine biologist like George Costanza, right? But here's one thing that I did hear, and I think I heard this maybe last year, that since COVID, you are seeing different patterns in the sea when it comes to the wildlife, because a lot of activity stopped for those 2 years or whatever it was, right? So people weren't on the boats as much and they weren't fishing as much, they weren't out there as much. And so that, I guess, emboldened some of the sea creatures to come closer than they normally would, because in the past, maybe they thought that there was too much human activity there and they stayed away.
Right, and realistically, it could have been our activity, human activity could have been what altered their original behavior.
Right. Absolutely.
And so then when humans were gone away, they went back to what they normally would do. And, that hasn't,
Well, yeah, normally, right. Without humans being present in the waters, the whole water is theirs. Right?
Right.
Now it's like, all these boats and this commercial activity, all the ferry activity, all the stuff happening by the shores and by the beaches and by certain areas, right? I think it did keep a lot of that sea population at bay, no pun intended.
Yeah. So, oh, what's up, Taz in the chat? He says, my question, why is this a discussion? That's their home. We aren't supposed to be out there messing with them anyway.
Well, but here's the thing, Rockaway's economy is very much dependent on people coming to the beach. I mean, it's a beach community, right? And so we need to talk about it. I think part of the discussion is to not scare people, right? Be honest and forthright about what's happening, but put it in perspective as well. And hopefully it won't stop people from going to the beach. But you know what? We do want to be vigilant about this. And there was talk about drones to keep an eye on the sharks and try to trace them, right? Try to follow them. So it is something we need to be mindful of. Just because it's rare doesn't mean that it's not an issue, right? So there's that too. I think talking about it is important to kind of provide this perspective and what we might want to do to address it.
Right. I mean, sharks tend to stay away, but if you're talking this, 10 feet off of the beach is very, very close. And so people definitely should be, especially if you've got, not only yourself, but your family and children in the water. You want to be definitely want to be vigilant about that. And it's a funny question coming from Taz, because I know Taz from Hawaii, where we both lived at and spent a lot of time on the beach there. And so, we tend to get into the water. I mean, especially if you're in a beach community, it's part of your environment and it's part of the cell of the place. So, yeah.
Yeah, but that, and then with that shark attack that took place in Egypt, it was the young man was 23 years old, which was even sadder. But he was swimming with his girlfriend, and she was able to return, and they weren't that far out either. But she was able to swim fast enough to get away, but he was not. And it was like pretty shallow waters. He wasn't that far out.
Right. Sounds like we might have some sort of negotiation with the sharks to say, you know what, you should not come in this far. We'll not go out this far. You can't come in this far. Let's have some kind of negotiation here.
But are they coming in because they're looking for food?
We should post signs up in the water.
Right.
Yeah. But you got to put them underwater so the shark can read them. They got to be underwater.
Right.
But when they come in, are they looking for food? Are they hungry? What's happening that they are attacking people?
I don't know.
What happens? What's happening with the shark?
They probably feel threatened that we're in their space.
It could be, and who knows? It could have just been like we said earlier. Maybe it was because there's been less activity of humans over the last couple of years, and so they're just exploring this area, and then humans pop up, and it's like, now we're in a fight or flight type of situation.
Right. I think there was more equilibrium in the past, right, where it just kind of settled, and we joke about it, but there kind of was that understanding, for lack of a better word, where the sharks wouldn't come so close. You know what I mean? Because people were all up in that spot. I think because things calmed down over the past few years, it disturbed that equilibrium, and hopefully we'll reach one again. I mean, if people keep going to the beach and you still see that activity there, then maybe it will push sharks further out again.
It could be. Yeah. So.
But
yeah, I would definitely be wary of it.
Honestly, me personally, I don't really go into the water that much anyway. I don't really like it. I don't like the sand on my feet. I don't like stepping in the seaweed and jellyfish. And it's not comfortable to me. It's not that I'm afraid. It's just not like, I'm more of like a laid back kind of stress-free, calm kind of guy. I don't want to deal with stuff that's going to annoy me or anger. You know what I mean? Like it's annoying to me to deal with that, or even like, plastic or little, whatever it is, like people's trash. Like you just get stuff all up on you that you don't need. So like I don't want that. I actually just walked into the Caribbean Sea over here because I'm in Cancun. Why wouldn't you? There were thousands of fish, and this is funny because I don't know if this happens normally or if this is a post-COVID thing as well. There were thousands of fish that started to surround me, the little small ones, when I stepped into the sea. And I'm talking about like 2 feet off of the beach, right?
Right.
Thousands of fish. And then I saw like a swordfish thing. I don't know if it was a swordfish, but it looked like a swordfish, but it was like maybe like this big with the long pointy nose. And it swam right in front of me. And I'm thinking like, why am I here in this habitat that clearly is not my habitat? I don't belong here. To Taz's point, like I'm in their land. I'm interrupting their school, right? This was a school of fish. I am clearly an intruder in their school, right? Like they're doing their school shooter drills or whatever that they're doing right now because I'm in their space. And so I got out right away, went back to the pool to swim up bar. I'm like, this is where I belong. You know, I don't need to be in their habitat.
You just imagine all the fish in the school, like predator.
Yeah. They're ringing the alarms, all right? They're like, they're hiding under desks.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
I would have had a net, catch some of those fish, and boy.
You wouldn't be eating those. These are like little small guppy, whatever you call them, like little goldfish.
And that could be.
I'm not going to make a sandwich.
It could be that that do people feed those fish there, and that could be.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know, maybe. But what was happening also when a wave would crash on the beach, it would bring the fish with it, and then you would have the birds, pelicans would come down and eat the fish off of the beach.
Wow. So maybe it's just part of the normal thing, and fish have gotten used to humans being there. There's a beach like that in Hawaii called Hanuma Bay, and you would go down there and you could swim and snorkel right there, and it's really right off the coast. The water is shallow, and fish will eat. You know, people feed the fish, and they'll eat right out of your hands. And so they're just so accustomed to people being there in the water that they don't swim away, they don't freak out, they don't even pay any attention to people, and you know, people just kind of do their thing.
Yeah, these fish did seem distressed that I was there. I'm sure people do it
disrupting their lessons.
Yeah. I threw a monkey wrench in 5th period, but there were other people obviously walking, they were just ignoring it, and you know, it is what it is, right? But I was looking down, they would definitely like scramble to swim around me. I was definitely all up in their space, and there were thousands of them. They were just everywhere, right? And then the swordfish looking thing seemed to look at me. Like he like swam past and I was like looking up at me like, but maybe he's used to people being around there. I wasn't used to being in a spot with little swordfish things with the pointy sharp noses coming at me. I don't know what that is.
Maybe he was the school security guard.
Yeah, right.
Keep an eye on you.
Or maybe they voted in their seat to arm the teachers, and he was a teacher with his weapon defending the school.
Right. Yeah. Every teacher got like a sword attached to their face.
Yeah. They had to have surgery to put a little sword in their face. I wasn't with it, but it's for the experience, right? I did go kayaking, and that was free, so that was part of the all-inclusive resort. I did some kayaking. I'm cool in the kayak. I just don't want to be walking around, swimming around there, especially as news breaks of shark attacks in Rockaway. If there's shark attacks in Rockaway, what's going on in Cancun? I don't want to know what's out there.
True.
You know, but yeah, like you said, be vigilant, be careful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, speaking of being
attacks
careful
in New York,
say it again.
I said, speaking of swarms and attacks in New York.
Yeah, right. Or being careful or not being careful enough. What is this guy's name? Let's try to pronounce this. Kai Cenat.
Your guess is as good as mine. Kai is the only thing that I know. I don't know how to know the last name. So
Kai sounds like a breed of fish.
It does. It sure does.
Koi fish. So Kai Cenat. He's a Twitcher, apparently, meaning he plays video games online. He live streams video games, and I guess he's some kind of influencer as a result of his twitching.
Yeah, this guy has a massive following, and he'd been doing it for years. He didn't really super pop until he jumped on Twitch. I think it was in 2020. But on Twitch, he's amassed 6.5 million followers on TikTok. He's got like 7 million followers. And that doesn't include his YouTube channel, which I don't know how many followers are on there, but he's pretty big. He's got a lot of people. He's huge.
Well, he decided to do a PlayStation giveaway at Union Square on Friday afternoon. See, this is the stuff I miss when I'm out of the country.
Oh.
I could have gotten a free PlayStation, apparently.
Or you could have got mobbed.
Or I could have gotten arrested by Riot.
More like mob than the police.
Yeah, right. It seems between 5,000 to 6,000 people descended upon Union Square for this PlayStation giveaway, and at least 66 people were arrested, including Kai Cenat, whatever, however you pronounce it, for inciting a riot. Now, on the ABC News article, there's a lawyer quoted as saying that he doesn't think that the charges will stick against this particular influencer, but the idea here is he knew the following he had and what could have happened as a result of announcing this. Apparently they did it before, but it wasn't quite to this degree. Maybe he didn't have as much influence at the time. They're saying that he should have taken more precautions, notify the police department at least 4 days in advance, so barricades could be put up, so proper precautions could be made. He didn't do that, I guess. He just announced it and all hell broke loose. So there you go. It looks like he's being charged with a felony as well as misdemeanors. But according to ABC, it says legal experts believe the felony charge won't stick and the misdemeanor charges have about a 10% chance of sticking.
Like, wouldn't it just be like negligence? Some type of negligence just for not recognizing like his following and the influence that he'd have on people, other than something that's directly like of a vicious nature, like.
I think, yeah. Well, right. So from what they're saying, officials didn't think that he intended for anything terrible to happen. I think he thought he was going to gather a big crowd. It was going to be a PR stunt. He was going to give away his PlayStation. But they're saying that, again, there's a difference between negligence and recklessness. I think they're saying that he knew that this could happen given his influence, and he consciously disregarded a substantial risk of it happening. So the idea is he said to himself, yeah, maybe a riot will break out, but I'm going to roll the dice on that.
That would be very difficult to prove unless he actually said something like that. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's just kind of being imputed on him given the size of his following. But in his defense, what his team is saying is that they've done things like this before without incident. So it would be one thing if he were to do it again. And I think that might be the distinction here. He may get away with this. But if he goes and does the same thing again next year or in a couple of months, especially if his following keeps growing, then it's kind of harder to defend, right? Because now we've seen consequences of it.
But when acts come into New York City, do they have any information on the celebrity, a person such as himself, how many people might follow him? Do we need crowd control? So
who is they? You know, people showing up?
Right. I mean, to me, it seems like him giving that event, the ball was dropped because not enough information was given to find out, or I would say researched to find out if they needed crowd control or not, especially with young people.
Well, no, the idea was that they weren't put on notice. They weren't given enough notice. If you're talking about the authorities, they weren't given enough notice. This was that was the whole critique of him, what he did. He just announced it and everyone just showed up, apparently.
Right. And a lot of times, I mean, with these Twitch streamers and or YouTube creators or influencers, I mean, a lot of times these are people who just they have these followings, and they're not setting out to do like a massive event. They're just, doing something for the followers, and it blows into something like this. Like, it's not that they're intending to amass thousands of people. And so, like you said, he's done something like this before. And, a lot of streamers and these content creators do things like this. They have lots of money that flow in. They're young, they got lots of money, and it just keeps coming in. constantly. So they do a lot of giveaways, or they just do money. Like apparently this Kai gave money to medical bills to I think it was a 6-year-old followers of his, paid for their medical bills. And this was intended not just one PlayStation, but multiple PlayStations and other electronics, it said. I think it's just more, maybe he should have known, but
right. And also, let's not forget, he is not acting alone. He's got a whole team. So
yeah,
looks like it's just one guy playing on Twitch or what have you, but he's got a PR team. You know, he's got lawyers, right? I mean, this is becoming a brand.
Oh yeah, he's a brand now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just looked up the law on inciting to riot in New York, which is a misdemeanor, Class A misdemeanor. A person is guilty of inciting to riot when he urges 10 or more persons to engage in tumultuous and violent conduct of a kind likely to create public alarm. So it's a little iffy, right? Because I'm sure he didn't say you guys should get violent, but the idea is that what he did was done knowing that that would result from his action.
But did he know that though, that they were going to like devolve into a riot, or did he just imagine that there's going to be a lot of people out there hanging out while, you know, partying, not actually rioting and doing? Because I think some people even attack cops or something like that. Like, kind of crazy.
And it is true. How could you charge him with knowing that people would erupt in that kind of violence?
But see, that's my point. Someone knew he was coming. How did
everyone knew
who knew he was coming to that in that area? Look at where the area too.
Well, he's got multiple millions of followers on various platforms. So when he announced the giveaway, he put that out on all his socials. So it went out to millions of people.
Right. They probably came right away, right? I mean, you can put it out and people start showing up in 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know if he planned ahead of time and put like, oh, I'm going to be here this day, come this time, or if it was a flash mob type of situation.
So you're saying no one in New York City was notified that he was coming?
He did not notify the authorities, no.
Authorities, no. Authorities, no.
Other than the authorities not knowing, who knew he was coming? Somebody had to know.
His followers knew.
And when he announced it, they knew, and then they showed up.
Right. I mean, I don't know if you're trying to say like the authorities should have known since it went out to millions of people.
I think, somebody should have been alerted in some way.
But that's what the knock is on him, right? That he didn't plan ahead. He didn't let the authorities know what was going on. So then they could have planned to put the resources there, to set up barricades, to direct traffic, and to assign people that location.
What I wonder if what Sheba is saying, and I'm asking the same question too, is that since they said like 5,000-6,000 people showed up, he sent it out to millions of people, so people knew. Why didn't the police pick up on it, even if he didn't contact them directly? Why weren't they aware that this was going to go out? Because obviously millions of people knew.
Right, but if it happened spontaneously, I mean, how far in advance did he announce it?
In the chat, looks like saying he put it out the day before. But even if it was spontaneous, still 5,000-6,000 people found it. The police wouldn't, how wouldn't the police catch that?
They could catch it, and I'm sure they did, but they didn't plan for it, right? So they've got to determine where to send their people on that day throughout the city.
Yeah.
You can have different, precincts borrowing officers potentially from other precincts. I mean, it's a coordination effort that has to happen. And that was part of the criticism as well, that he really wasted police resources by doing that, and it required a big police presence to handle this, and as a result, police were not handling other things they could have been handling around the city.
Right. Yeah. So and on the other side, we have to recognize or acknowledge that obviously some people went there with the intent of just wilding out. and doing something crazy. Like whatever his intent might have been to give away, to give back to his followers and this and that. It probably wasn't to cause a riot. We don't know, but probably not. But some people obviously went there with that intent in mind to wild out, or they got caught up in the fury of so much activity and energy going around. They just started going crazy.
Well, the riot is a felony in New York. We said he was charged with a felony as well as misdemeanors. The inciting the riot, actually the misdemeanor. The riot itself is a felony. That one requires 10 or more people. A person is engaging in bellicose and destructive conduct, purposely or with intentional disregard for substantial risk. They bring about, or almost certain to bring about, a public panic. And during that conduct, one of the rioters destroys personal property or harms a person's physical health, unless they are one of the rioters. So I guess if they harm or another rioter's health, it doesn't count. Or a person who is in jail or prison. Well, this doesn't apply, jail or prison. So the first one, 10 or more people engaging in destructive conduct, and this is the key also, purposefully or with intentional disregard for substantial risk. They bring about, or almost certain to bring about, a public panic. And so that's what they're saying, that it was the intentional disregard for the substantial risk. That's recklessness, not just negligence. Basically, he knew what he was doing by initiating this because of the size of his following. By announcing the PlayStation giveaway, it was certain or near certain to cause this panic, right? Where people going crazy over this PlayStation. As we said, it's iffy as to whether this would actually stick, because
Right.
Was that his intention, and how sure are we that he consciously disregarded a risk of this happening? I mean, maybe he thought it was going to be all peaceful. Should you think that that's going to cause a riot? I mean, shouldn't people be expected to behave in a more civilized manner? Just because a PlayStation is being offered as a prize, does that mean that a riot is inevitable?
But what caused the riot? Was it not having the PlayStation?
Right.
According to, well, at least according to looks in the chat, that the rioting and stuff broke out before they were even able to give the stuff away. So I guess he didn't even get the chance to give it away because the crowd got out of control.
Right. I wonder if they were trying to get closer to it. Like, was he saying, I want to hear from you guys, like, make noise if you want the PlayStation? Were they trying to get his attention, trying to get closer to where he was at? And that could have been part of it as well, right? We don't know. At least I don't know right now what he was saying to the crowd. Maybe he was directing them to behave in a way which is certain to cause rioting.
Or it was just, you get a bunch of people together and sometimes wilding out happens. And,
again, though, sometimes wilding out happens. Does that meet the standard of felony riot or misdemeanor inciting to riot? I mean, where is that law? Just because you're an influencer and you have followers means that that a riot is going to break out, or just because you're giving out prizes? Where you draw that line? Where we're saying someone knows now that a riot is about to go down.
I think because when I look at the riots of old, that was when people were inciting it. He didn't incite his.
Well, he is being charged with that, though. They're saying he's inciting a riot.
Charged with that. Yeah. He didn't throw a brick. He didn't.
Well, no, but inciting. But those are two different things,
tell
right?
People to go out there.
Inciting the riot is not rioting, right? Inciting the riot is causing people to riot.
Right, but he didn't do that. That's what I'm saying.
Well, arguably, right?
That's what they're gonna. I guess they're gonna be. I guess they're gonna be trying to figure that out in court if they can put that. And
if it even goes that far, I mean, the stuff might get dropped.
Right. I mean, some 5,000-6,000 people damage, attacked to some cops. They're going to be looking to pin something on somebody. 5,000-6,000 people. Well, we got a double attack to some cops. They're going to be looking to pin.
Oh, that you were still okay. Yeah.
I'm getting an echo from you.
Yeah, what I was going to say is 66 people were arrested, and so I'm sure that charges are more likely to stick on people who are actually doing violent things. People throwing stop cars, whatever they were doing, that's going to be more chargeable.
Right. So according to this other article that I was reading about it, the person who received the most serious charges was this guy Robert Seasons, and he's 31, so that kind of goes against what was going on in chat, talking about the youth not knowing how to behave. So he was charged with assaulting 5 police officers. He bit, spit, and kicked 5 officers in the face, causing severe bleeding, gashes, and lacerations after the police responded to him behaving disorderly on an MTA bus.
There you go, right there. He bit, right? We just said that earlier. You're more likely to be bitten by a New Yorker than a shark.
Right. Right. So I mean, those are some pretty, I mean, that's outright attacking police officers. And another person was charged with oh, you just did a full thing and I lost my place here. Was charged with obstructing governmental administration and resisting arrest. He was charged with someone else was just charged with disorderly conduct because prosecutors say he danced on a taxi cab and resisted arrest. And another was charged with punching an officer during his arrest. So there's there's a lot of stuff that went on there.
What you're looking at on the screen actually is the shark bite victim. Thank you to PJ for sending that along. I actually saw this earlier also. This wasn't the New Yorker biting someone. This was the shark's dirty work.
Right.
So you can see a big piece of her leg was bitten off there.
Yeah, that's kind of graphic there, Mike.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it sounds to me like the charges against these individuals or at least some of these individuals, especially ones that blatantly attacked police officers, those are going to definitely stick.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah.
Well,
I always just on a side note, it always is funny to me that there's an actual charge called a resisting arrest, because like anyone naturally is going to resist being detained. Like
maybe it should be renamed to something harsher.
Like you're putting me in handcuffs and you're about to lock me up. Like anyone's natural inclination is to resist that. How do you charge people with resisting arrest? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Maybe it should be changed to, I don't know, fighting back or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, you should fight back. Like, I mean,
physically, I don't think that's advisable. No.
It's not advisable, but I mean, at some point, especially when you look at police brutality, especially depending on if you're a certain minority, you could be looking at your last days with this arrest, and that goes through your mind. So you're gonna want to fight back. You're gonna try to preserve life. So
you're gonna want to, but
yeah,
it could end up making things worse.
Systems against you at that point, but I mean, still. What we got here in the chat? Oh yeah, Lick. So we saw that.
What is that?
The Alabama riverfront brawl.
Oh yeah, and she also, I think she tagged me in the comment. That's why we got the echo before. I was trying to pull up the comment.
Gotcha. But we'll see what happens to Kai. Again, I think your point, like if he gets, nothing happens if they drop everything on this first one, which it can go either way. But if he does this again and doesn't get the proper, or doesn't reach out to authorities and let that be known, then I think it's definitely much more of a way to stick it to him, to say, well, you knew this was possibility. You might not have known it was going to happen.
Not just a possibility, but a high likelihood. But it's also interesting to think about other influencers, not just him, because this is a big news story now, and we saw what happened. We're all talking about it. And so someone else with millions of followers, they should take those precautions too, because I could definitely see that being used against them. If this one guy gets away with it, someone else might not get away with it, because they can be like, you're aware of the consequences. You've seen it in action already.
Right. That's a very good point. All influencers at this point, especially those with significant followings, doing something like this should kind of be on notice. And I think oftentimes influencers don't recognize the power that they have, because you can amass these millions of followers and never see them never really interact with them on the scale that it is 1 million followers. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like,
right,
for example,
yeah,
a Taylor Swift to go out on stage and she'll see like, 50,000 people in the audience. So she's used to seeing that. She'll walk in the street and she's used to seeing that. But some of these influencers and content creators, they don't get that. So they can be disconnected a little bit from how many people are actually a million.
That's funny. Yeah, no, and I actually, to a much smaller degree, I felt some of that when I was in the public. I'm a candidate for office. My name's in the paper all the time, and all these people know me. My life didn't feel much different on a day-by-day basis, right? You're still getting up, you're brushing your teeth, you're getting your breakfast, you're doing what you always did. You feel like an anonymous person like you were yesterday or last week, even though you're really not. Now you're in the public spotlight. You're a public figure now. All the people are looking at you and paying attention to you. It's kind of weird, right, when you're in that, because you don't feel any different than you just felt when you were completely private the day before. And so it is hard to adjust to that, right, to that knowledge of everyone paying attention, because it's like, you're just going about your business like you otherwise would. And it's hard. It's an odd thing.
And when it's over the internet, there is a disconnect from it being from the real life effects of it. And so, I think a lot of influencers don't recognize that when they have these massive audiences.
Shout out to Tina, Lorraine, Lixa, PJ, James, everyone joining us in the chat. We really appreciate it. We saw Jactus, I think it's one of my old classmates from junior high school and high school, Danny. So
nice.
What's up to him? We really appreciate it. We want to wrap up pretty quickly, but we do want to talk about our polls from weeks prior that we put out there. And then we had one more topic and the subsequent poll question for the next week. So let's get into it, Jay. I know you had 2 poll questions that you put on. Was it Daily Cost? Is that how you pronounce it?
I always say Daily Codes, but we were kind of 2 weeks behind on polls. We didn't get to talk about the polls for the last 2 weeks. So I put both of those up and out just on our YouTube and also on different places and Daily Codes. But so the first one was should drunk drivers who kill parents be responsible for child support? Or actually, no, that wasn't the first one. The first one was, should legacy admissions be allowed in college admissions? And so, as we talked about, not last week, but the week before, that in the wake of affirmative action being banned on college admissions, now the Education Department or Department of Education has launched an investigation into Harvard's university policies on legacy admissions. So we put the poll out there and we got 14% said yes, legacy admissions should be allowed in college admissions. 77% said no, and 9% said not sure on that there. So I think the majority of people agree, no, it shouldn't be. And then some people brought up what we talked about before, is that basically it'd be hard to determine this in a court case because it's not really written into the rules or the policy that legacy admissions happen, right? So we have to kind of prove that this is an actual practice that's been going on and it's backed by the university and not like, say, whoever the recruiter is themselves.
And I don't think it would be too difficult to prove that it's happening, but even if you can prove it's happening, then what? I mean, a court could say you have to stop it and they can keep doing it, just calling it something else or trying to disguise it, because it's just one of those things where they're just giving preference to certain people. Maybe it's not on paper necessarily, but they're still doing it.
Right. I think, and we talked about that, like a way to kind of back up the claims that this was being done as a matter of just this culture in that university is to look at history of admissions and see how it's been applied, see what their stuff is. I mean, George W. Bush went to Harvard and Yale, and he was a C student. So we know he didn't get in on his merits and his grades.
And his father was an alum, right, of Yale.
Right, his father, and I think his grandfather, too, Prescott, was also an alum. So,
that was a Skull and Bones,
Yeah, so we had there was a lot of comments, good discussion that was taking place in here. One person was like, it'd be nice if my kids could go to my alma mater. This is a problem because they unfairly taking up places that could go to someone more deserving. So he said sees the argument of people wanting their kids to go to their alma mater, but he doesn't like it. And I'm screwing up.
Also, no, and that's very honest, right? It's a good comment. The question also though is, if you're going to challenge this from a legal perspective, what are you going to base your arguments on? I mean, we saw with the affirmative action case, that was the equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act, right? But that was really about race. And we talked about a higher constitutional standard that must be met when you're discriminating using race as a factor. When you're talking about legacy emissions, now you're discriminating on the basis of someone being a descendant of an alumnus. That gets a very low bar. That gets rational basis review. So it's very deferential to the people set in this policy, right? We also talked about the difference between a private school and a public school, right? If it's a public school, then you do have the Constitution more readily at play. If it's a private school, it gets a little more tricky because the Constitution doesn't apply directly, but when there's public money involved, sometimes it does. And then you also have the Civil Rights Act, which does apply towards public schools. But again, it's easier to bring a case when you're talking about race on its face. When you're talking about legacy emissions, it gets harder now to attack it from a legal, like, what are you going to hang your argument on? You could look at disparate impact. We talked about that last week also, right? Or whenever we mentioned it, we talked about how even with legacy emissions, race comes into it, but it's just not as direct. Go ahead.
Right, because I was going to say, when you look at the legacy in these colleges, it has been predominantly
absolutely, and that's why
white male.
Yeah,
I think that's a distinction. We want to make sure it's white male, because a lot of benefactors of affirmative action were white women. So we're going to make sure that it's white male.
And that's why you're seeing the Justice Department, for example, I think it's Education Department, but it's the federal government going and pursuing this. And they're saying, listen, you colleges now are not allowed to do affirmative action as you were doing it, but here's something you might want to look at. You might want to look at curbing these legacy emissions, because that has an effect also on the diversity of the campus. But the point here, though, is that it matters a lot as far as the law is concerned, whether you're facially discriminating or not, right? Whether your policy is, we're looking at race and using that as a factor, or whether you're saying, and you might not even be really saying this, but whether you're looking at legacy and you're looking at family lineage and who went there and whatnot. Yeah, sure, that is going to have those racial effects, but on its face, you're not saying we're choosing based on race, and that creates a different legal analysis, which is more deferential to the schools. So it's harder to challenge.
And someone in the comment also on the poll addressed that issue that you brought up, that we talked about between public and private, and their take that private colleges, if they're saying they receive very little or zero taxpayer money, so they should be allowed to admit anyone they want for whatever reason. However, public colleges and universities that receive taxpayer funds, they should forbid legacy admissions or any type of admission that isn't openly fair and available to all candidates.
Well, how much do you think Harvard is subsidized? Because Harvard was one of the schools in the affirmative action case.
But is it a land grant school?
A land grant school?
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
That's when land is given to college.
Oh, a land grant.
Grant. Right.
So you're saying, is the school built on public land, or was it given to the college? That I don't know.
I don't know.
But I do believe it is heavily subsidized. I don't think it's true that a school like Harvard gets no subsidies from the government.
Right, that's my point. In some way, are they getting subsidies?
And that wasn't, when I read that affirmative action case, it was a couple hundred pages. It didn't really, as far as I can recall, it didn't go into detail on why they were applying the 14th Amendment. They did mention in the beginning that this was brought via the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause, and the Civil Rights Act. But then when they did their analysis, they really focused heavily on the 14th Amendment equal protection part of it, and they applied that seemingly to both Harvard and UNC. So they were applying the constitutional provision to the private school and the public school, right? Which leads me to think that Harvard is heavily subsidized by the government, which is why they're comfortable applying the Constitution to it.
Well, here's from Harvard's own finance page on the endowment.
Look at this. I like it.
Even with endowment support, Harvard must fund nearly 2/3 of its operating expenses, which was $5.4 billion in fiscal year 2022, from other sources such as federal and non-federal research grants, student tuitions and fees, and gifts from alumni, parents, and friends. So they do, at least grant-wise, they do take in some federal money.
Right.
And was that federal money brought in due to affirmative action?
It sounded like grants. I don't have the details on it, but they probably apply for whatever grants are available, and who knows what the grants could be, right? They could be grants for maybe diversity grants. They could be
exactly.
You know, things
what about
like
tax breaks? Are there tax breaks that these private institutions use because they're providing a public service, it's an educational facility?
It's a good question.
It's you know, that move with the Supreme Court, it's opened up a lot of discussions. Because even the discussion we're having here, it's opened up a lot of things to be discussed.
Right, because there's
here we go.
You can apply it to other areas. Yeah.
This is also from Harvard's page. The question on this frequently asked questions is Harvard University a tax-exempt organization? And the answer was president and fellows of Harvard College is exempt from federal income tax as an educational institution under Section 501C of the IRS or the Internal Revenue Code. As an educational institution, Harvard is also exempt from Massachusetts state income tax.
Right, it's a 50, because it's a nonprofit. It's considered a nonprofit, the colleges and universities.
Right, but that's an interesting point in itself, though, because every nonprofit, every 501c3 would enjoy that, right? That tax subsidy, if you want to call it that, all those tax breaks. But would you be able to apply? But hold on a second. Would you be able to apply the constitutional provisions to every nonprofit? I don't think so. I don't think that.
No, it depends.
Freedom of speech that doesn't apply to every nonprofit, right? The 14th Amendment doesn't apply to every nonprofit. So you need more than that.
Right, but it depends on the 501, what the 501c, what that number is behind it too.
Right.
So it depends on that too. So that's another research to be done.
Yeah, it was a 5. Was it was C3?
Yeah.
Yeah, not only C3s, you have 501c4.
Right. But he was saying that this is a C3.
This is a C3.
Harvard is a C3?
Yes.
Oh, well.
Is Harvard a C3 or is it some kind of other foundation associated with Harvard?
Well, this is on their tax page. 501c. Well, let's see.
Harvard itself?
It says president and fellows of Harvard College is exempt from federal income tax.
President and fellows of Harvard College. So that's a different group. That's not the school itself, right?
Unless that's what the full name of the college is.
I don't think so. I think it's a group of the presidents and fellows of the school. I think it's a separate group.
Wait 1 moment.
I'm at the website right now. I'm on the website right now, the harvard.edu, and at the very bottom it says copyright 2023, the president and fellows of Harvard College.
Right, but that might be the group that put together that website. That doesn't mean that's the name of the school, right?
I don't know, but it could be. Maybe that's their operating name.
Well, yeah, I mean,
a
lot of, well, the bottom line is no pun intended.
The bottom line is,
but I know that a lot of these private schools, and Harvard is no exception, are heavily subsidized by the government, and there are different ways that they do it. They could have different.
Okay, I looked it up.
Right.
Harvard, I looked it up. Harvard University is registered as a 501c3 nonprofit organization with the IRS.
So Harvard itself is also a 501c3.
Yes.
Right.
That's
and
just
so,
like,
I mean,
you know who else gets away with that? The National Football League. They're registered as a 501c3.
Right.
What? Really?
Yes.
Come
Look it up.
on.
Yes.
Come
The
on.
teams are not, right?
No.
The teams are for profit, right?
Right. But
The
the
organization-
But the
organization itself is
right, the
nonprofit.
organization is not. See, and there are different ways they
501c3.
maneuver
That just
this.
that sounds like a game to me. Come
It's all a
on.
game. It's all a game, you know.
Anyway, so that was the results on that
Yeah.
poll. Maybe we should go on to the next one.
Yeah.
The next poll was what we talked about last week. It's regarding the Texas law that was enacted, Texas law HB 393, also known as Bentley's law, which will hold drunk drivers accountable for the deaths of parents killed in accidents that they cause. And so the poll that we put up was, should drunk drivers who kill parents be responsible for the child support? And in the poll, we got 63% said yes, 11% said no, and 27% said I'm not sure.
That's a lot for a third, almost a third of
Yeah.
respondents, I guess a little more than a quarter, to say not sure on any question, right? As
Right,
polarized
yeah.
as we are today, as opinionated as everyone is today, you would expect people to be like, hell yes or hell no. To have that
Yeah.
many say they're not sure is pretty telling.
Right. Yeah. And so there was a pretty lengthy discussion on this, and it brought up some of the points that we also brought up as far as, you know, the effect, the ability of the person to pay, or should everyone around them be taken into account as far as punishment?
Why is it limited to only driving, right?
Right. Yeah.
What about any time you kill a parent? And by the way, we were focusing on accidents. What if it's not an accident? What if someone straight up murders someone's parent? Why should they not be responsible for child support, but the drunk driver who accidentally does it is?
So here was a point that was brought up in here. This person said the problem with this type of law is that it carries the potential to punish those who did not commit the crime. Imagine explaining to a kid that they can't go to college or remain in their home because something their mom or dad did.
Right.
So I guess because the parent is paying out this money, they don't have money to pay their rent or send their kids to college. But then it also brings into, like, you know, how are you prioritizing their family over the family that they took? So that, you know, makes made for a
but is it prioritizing? Is that the way to look at it? Or are you just punishing other people? Are you creating more victims?
Right. And see, that's what's in our discussion too. It's going to be detrimental to both, you know, it's detrimental for the loss. It's like losses all over. There's no win in this, as they're saying.
But if they're not held accountable, then the ultimate loss rests on the child who lost their parents.
Why are we assuming
then
that to hold them accountable means they got to pay child support? I mean, if they're sent to prison, is that not holding them accountable?
Well, in this, it was regarding this law, child support is a part of that. Now we have to also acknowledge, though, according to the law, it's not that they're going to be, you know, paying, you know, their whole paycheck out. The judge is supposed to consider factors like the child's financial and educational needs, their physical and emotional condition, the standard of living the child's accustomed to, the resources and needs of the surviving parent, and the financial resources of the offender. So that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to financially break the person if their financial resources are taken into account when the judge decides how much they have to pay. So
right, but what about but that's good. That's good in one aspect, but what about when that salary is not enough, or the insurance is not enough?
Well, we would ideally the judge would take that into
constantly pay fines. I have to get a second job to pay that.
It seems like you're opening a door to a concept now that was supposed to be limited to your own children, right? Like you pay child support for your own children. Now you're saying you pay child support for someone else's children because of a crime that you committed on someone's parents. And it's starting off with just one context, but is it fair to only keep it to that one context, or is it going to be opened up to everything? And we're just going to say, when you commit a crime, and by the way, where do you draw that line? I mean, is it just going to be if any behavior that you engage in that's unlawful, that results in someone's death, if they're a parent, you're on the hook for child support? Is that where this is going? You know,
I mean,
it's an expansion of our idea of what child support is.
I get that, but I also get the motivation behind it, because if you've killed their parent because of your negligence and the choices that you made, you've impacted that child's life for the rest of their life. They're not going to have their parent for the rest of their life. And that means every situation, every experience that could have happened. That means their mental well-being. That could be their career well-being, their life. They could be bouncing around from different place to place.
Right.
So I get the motivation behind.
Yeah, no, certainly. I certainly understand what's coming from.
Yeah.
But what if it was phrased differently? What if it wasn't put as child support? What if it was just restitution and it wasn't you're responsible every year or every month or however they're going to structure this? What if it's just you have to pay them a lump sum right then and there? And maybe if you don't have that money, you have to come up with a payment plan and you're paying it as time goes on. But there's just a judgment against you at the outset, as opposed to you being basically a supporter of this child until they turn 18.
Right.
And I mean, they're calling it the child support law, but it's basically paying restitution to support the victim's minor children. So it is kind of that.
I think about that last time, though, right? That's not a new concept in law. In criminal context, you do see restitution sometimes applied. So if it was framed that way, would it be controversial at all? I mean, we probably wouldn't be talking about it.
Right. So, and someone actually in the comments of the poll mentioned something like that, saying that where is it? That they're seeing that it's not uncommon for offenders to have to pay restitution in many states.
I wonder what the psychological effect would be on that child to think now that basically you're being supported financially by the killer of your parent. I mean, would that be detrimental to them? That's your sugar daddy now? That's the person who's taking care of you? I mean, do you want them in your life that long? I'm serious.
They don't.
I don't have to associate with them anymore.
I don't think you'd have to associate with them. That would just be probably an agency.
But they're paying you child support, though, as if they're your father. I mean, that's what child support is, right? That's how we understand it in our society. Something you pay to your own children. That's your new father now, in a sense. Like, why should they get to be your new father?
I don't know if I'd go that far and say new father, but
they're paying your child support.
I get what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah.
It might do something psychologically to them.
Yeah.
Well, all right. We want to ask our new poll question before we wrap up, and this is going to be based on toll prices going up, right? I know, Sheba, you sent an article about a trucking company filing for bankruptcy, right? The Teamsters are heavily involved in this one, and I think you said 30,000 people losing their jobs.
Yeah, Yellow Trucking. Yep.
So let's talk about this, because we've covered congestion pricing on this show, and we know that it's going to take effect, and obviously it's going to be a lot pricier to drive around New York City, certainly around Manhattan and so-called congested areas. Is that going to be a problem for people? I mean, you see these trucking companies go out of business, and you could attribute that to a number of factors, not maybe only increased tolls, but I'm sure it is a factor and certainly a concern of many. And so we wanted to get people's thoughts on that. Now that this is becoming a reality, is it going to affect your driving habits, right? Or do you think it's going to affect your bottom line? Is it going to change your behavior in any way? What is it going to mean for you? Is it a concern? I mean, are we afraid that other companies might go out of business? I know Uber and Lyft were dealing with this one as well, talking about the surcharge, and people are trying to lobby for carve-outs, and there's been a lot of pushback on that. So what's going to happen here, right? What are the ramifications to our own lives and to these different companies, our whole economy? What's going to happen? It's kind of what we want.
We weighed that. We talked about that as well. Like, this is like, how do you determine that? Like, who gets the exemption? And what if you got to go in more than once that day? I know I was conscious when I was living in Valley Stream. I was conscious of having to go into Manhattan because, toll of the ticket fee is significantly higher than just jumping on the subway. when you're jumping on the LIRR, you know. And so imagine having to drive one or two. Imagine, let's say you're in Williamsburg and you're just right across the bridge, and you know, where it's like a 10-minute drive. Like you could theoretically go into Manhattan like 2 or 3 times a day. Like that's a significant expense now.
Yeah.
So
right. And I always make this point too, in South Queens in particular, we talked about the Cross Bay Bridge, and we've always said that it wasn't fair to toll drivers to go from Queens to Queens, and how that stifled our economic activity, right? It's been a real problem for us for many years, and people have been fighting this for decades. Well, I think we have to keep that same energy. We got to be consistent here. When we talk about what's going on in Manhattan, if we're saying it's not fair to charge drivers to go from Queens to Queens because it's an intra-borough toll, then we have to be consistent and say it's also not fair to charge drivers to drive within Manhattan. I think it's, you know, maybe not quite the same because it's Manhattan versus Queens, but still, right? It's an intra-borough toll, and I think it does stifle economic growth. I mean, I think it's going to be counterproductive. My view on this is it's, you know, it's actually going to be a detriment to our economy, and it's regressive, right? Because it harms people who really shouldn't be harmed. I mean, who can't afford to pay more tolls and taxes at this point.
Right. Yeah. And we talked about, it was another, what was it, a couple of weeks back or a month back, that the poll came out that, what was it, more than 50% of New Yorkers can't afford their expenses. And so now they're going to have an extra expense on top of that.
Right. Unless you take the view that it's going to modify a lot of people's behavior and they're just not going to drive anymore, because that's really one of the driving forces behind this, right? We want, they're saying we want to get people out of their cars, and if it's prohibitively expensive, it's, you know, basically it's a luxury. I mean, to me, even if that is your goal, I don't think this is the right approach, because you're basically saying people can still do it if they can afford to. So if they have a lot of money and they're privileged, you know, it's like, you know, they've got the luxury to do it, but everyone else who doesn't have that privilege now has to suffer.
Right. Yeah.
You know, but you know, but is it? I mean, maybe that's the poll question we should ask. Is it going to personally affect your own behavior? So we get a sense of that. Are people not going to drive as much, or do they feel they have no choice? Right. Again, South Queens, we're a very unique neighborhood. We do rely on cars much more than some other places, and I see this online all the time, and it drives me crazy. People will say, well, New York City is very walkable, you don't need a car here. Yeah, if you're in Manhattan, if you're in certain parts of Brooklyn, but talk about Staten Island, talk about the Rockaways, talk about Howard Beach, talk about how poor a lot of our public transit is. We fight for the Queens Rail, still fighting for it, right? We're so behind the times on a lot of our infrastructure. In the meantime, the way our neighborhoods are set up, you kind of have to drive. Many people, and not, you know, not everyone, but many people have to drive to get around, depending on the situation, their circumstance, where their job is, etc. You know, it's just an inevitability of our neighborhoods. Now you're making it so much more difficult in terms of the prices, the tolls. Is it going to make people not drive, or are they going to still say, I don't have a choice because of where I live and because my circumstances? It's just going to make it, you know, unaffordable for me to live here.
Yeah. And I think it's already, it's not a good time, really. It's never a good time for this, but you're looking at the situation where was it a good portion of buildings are becoming empty in Manhattan, starting with the pandemic, and because of prices have increased, and people are doing remote work, and people are leaving the city because it's getting too cost prohibitive. And then add this on top of it, I don't think it's going to fare well for the economy in Manhattan.
That's just the economy of Manhattan. It's all of New York City, right? It's really the whole New York area. But I'm concerned about people who live in Queens, who live in the so-called outer boroughs, who have to drive. What does it do to them? And it's not easy. Unless you're going to create more attractive public transportation, it's really not easy for people to just say, I'm not going to drive anymore. I'm just going to start taking the subway or taking a bus, you know, taking a train. We don't have that infrastructure the way we need it. We need much better before we can start. And again, use the carrot method, not the stick method, right? We should be incentivizing alternatives instead of punishing behavior that we deem undesirable. Right.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that.
So here's the poll question of the week. Now I see it was on the tip of my tongue and I lost it. I think I said it before. Oh, is it going to affect your own personal behavior, right? Is that what we're going with this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it gonna something about? Is it gonna cause
Make
you
you
to
drive
drive
less? Is that what we're gonna say? Drive less? We can go with that one.
Yeah.
All right. So the poll question of the week is: are increased toll prices going to make you personally drive less?
I think that's a good one because actually in the chat right now, Lixa said that she doesn't drive as much now. So
well, Lixa, I'm interested to hear about how your lifestyle has changed or what this has meant for you. So you don't drive as much, meaning you're taking more public transit or you're staying home more. I mean, if you are taking more public transit, is it easy? Is it doable? I mean, what does it mean for your day? Are you commuting more? You know, what is it actually doing to your lifestyle?
It looks like in her situation, she said she's remote. And so I guess there could have been a job situation change.
Right.
But she said when she did work in Manhattan, she took the train. Traffic and parking is horrible in Manhattan, which is absolutely true. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it's
so this
crazy.
is what I want to hear from people, right? About how it affects their own personal lives.
Right. Yeah. How do we, are you going to make any changes? Do you feel like you're forced to make any changes? Have you had to make some changes already?
Right. And what does this mean for your bottom line? If you're still driving in, but your expenses are going to go up, and what are you cutting? I mean, does it mean you eat out less? Do you have to do less grocery shopping? I mean, where are your savings going to come from?
So what about the cabs? What about when you get hailed, with a cab? That's a double fare, isn't it? Because not only are you paying the cab to go downtown, do you pick up, say, if they pass that certain part, street going into downtown in Manhattan, who picks that cost up? The customer or the cab driver?
Yeah, a lot of that's going to be passed on to the customer.
They're going to pass it on to the customer because I say that because if you I used to live in Valley Stream, and so when I would fly back into New York, I would take a taxi from JFK to Valley Stream. Well, JFK is in Queens. Valley Stream is right there on the border. It's on the Long Island side. And so there would be a jump in the taxi there, but to cross that border, there'd be an extra charge for crossing into Long Island. Yeah. And that would be put on to me as the rider, as the passenger. So I imagine they're going to do the same thing with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be horrible because if it's like $15, $20,
yeah, imagine that. And you know what? It's like so much of our economic base in the city is in Manhattan. I mean, people need to do business in Manhattan. Yeah. This is the way our city is set up. And now you're punishing people for getting there. I mean, I know people are going to say, well, don't drive. But easier said than done for so many people.
Yeah, it is. It's easier said than done. And listen, we know that, even though transportation in New York City is not perfect, a lot of people do get around without having a vehicle at all. So it's possible, but it can be very inconvenient, and it can take.
But it also depends on where you live. And look, I've got friends in South Queens, right? Rockaway is how I preach, who don't have a car. Most people do. I've got friends who don't, and they'll say, well, I live in New York City, I don't need a car. That's what they say. That's what they say. Right. But here's the thing. How many times are they asking me for rides? Very frequent. Right. And they're like, well, I got to get to the grocery store. You're coming over. Can you drop me off? Can you take me here? Can you take me there? So they don't need cars themselves, but they use other people's cars.
Right. Yeah. And that's true. Like either if they want, like you said, the carrot and the stick method instead of a punitive type of approach, maybe they need to start looking at the way that things are being developed. If they want less cars on the road, make neighborhoods a little bit more walkable, so that grocery stores are within a reasonable walkable range, or whatever they need to get to, or
better bus service, better train service.
Better train service. Like, I mean, we know train service is generally decided aimed at getting people into Manhattan instead of getting people in between boroughs. And so you've got to take longer routes just to go from certain parts of Queens to certain parts of Brooklyn, when it could have just been a straight line.
Right.
So
exactly.
Yeah.
That's the Queens Rail right there, Queens Link. So we gotta go.
Yeah.
We gotta go. Let's do a bottom line. Someone give me a bottom line.
No talent. Talent. I call you talent. Tip, Jay.
Me, bottom line of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see, the bottom line. What did we talk about today? I'd say let's go off of this part here. The bottom line is, and going back to a point that you've made multiple times here, and we've talked about as far as using this carrot and a stick method instead of a punitive approach, and look at how things affect people, you know, in the community and the citizenry before we make these sorts of decisions and these new rules that are put in place. We understand that things are very complex, very difficult as far as managing, especially something on the scale of New York City or even just any city in general. But we also have to look at how it's going to affect the people instead of affect what the numbers look like. And we have to make decisions that are based on real world consequences versus, you know, Excel spreadsheets.
Right.
So, you know, let's make better choices in that regard, something that makes people's lives easier instead of something that puts a burden on people's lives that they have to tolerate just to survive.
Right. And to add on to that, sometimes their numbers aren't what they appear to be.
That's true. That's true.
So
that's very true.
We'll look at the financial implications of this all, but yeah, we are interested in hearing the real life implications. So let us hear your stories, guys.
Yes, and you can do that by going to our YouTube channel, Nuance Show. When this goes live on there, give us your stories in the comments. That would be awesome, so we can hear how these things affect you. Also, we are on Instagram. You can send messages, you can post responses there, and then if you're in the podcast, which I hope that you are, then you can subscribe on any of the podcast platforms, you know, Spotify, Apple Music, I think even iHeartRadio's on there, but also YouTube podcasts. So get in there, get involved, let us know what's going on with you, and have a good week.
Sounds good. Why don't we do one last look at the balcony before we wrap this up? Let's do it.
oh, you're trying to rub it in on us.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's my last night here.
Yeah,
let's go.
I'm gonna have to go to the beach so I can compete.
I was gonna say, in that case, don't forget the souvenirs.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
That's right. Look at that.
So,
there you go.
Oh
I think everyone in New York is gonna be expecting, like, I don't know, empanadas from you when you get back.
I told you this is a very Americanized resort, so maybe a hamburger.
I'll take it.
Right.
Thank you for joining us. As always, we've got work to do. Next week, I'll be back in New York.